The silence on the dais was suffocating, punctuated only by the faint hum of the ceremonial hall's energy conduits. Captain Elias Varick shifted uncomfortably in his crisp uniform, the galaxy's most uncomfortable spotlight glaring down on him. Rows of Zilari dignitaries, their elongated forms shimmering in the refracted light of the council chamber, stared with expressions that could generously be called inscrutable. He cleared his throat, searching for the right words. Or any words, really. "Well, this is unexpected," he said finally, gesturing toward the towering figure now standing to his right. The unexpected in question was Sereth. Silver-skinned, with luminous veins tracing faint patterns across her arms and temples, she stood as still as a hologram, her expression one of serene disinterest. If she found the moment humiliating, or hilarious, she gave no indication. "Captain Varick," intoned the Zilari High Chancellor, her voice smooth and echoing, "in gratitude for your unparalleled bravery in saving our people, the Council bestows upon you this gift. May she serve you well." A ripple of murmured approval swept through the chamber, though Elias caught a few sharp glances among the crowd. Not everyone agreed with the decision, it seemed. Not that it mattered, because no one had bothered asking him. He opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. Rejecting a gift from the Zilari, especially one of this magnitude, could torpedo the very alliance he'd risked his life to secure. Thank you," Elias said, forcing a smile. He turned to Sereth, trying to assess her reaction. She stared back at him, her luminous amber eyes unnerving in their intensity. It felt like being studied by a particularly judgmental AI. "Do you come with an instruction manual?" he quipped under his breath, low enough for only her to hear. Her lips twitched, barely, but it was there. "No, Captain," she replied, her voice like liquid steel. "But I assure you, I am very user-friendly." It was the closest thing to a joke he'd heard from her all day, though it wasn't exactly comforting. Back aboard the stalwart Endeavor, Elias's starship, the mood was considerably less formal. His crew, a motley mix of humans and aliens, greeted Sereth's arrival with the kind of awkward enthusiasm reserved for unwanted in-laws or malfunctioning cargo drones. "So, is she going to bunk with the rest of us? Or does she get her own fancy alien quarters?" asked Arden, Elias's first mate, a wiry man with a penchant for terrible jokes and worse timing. "Quarters are negotiable," Elias replied, rubbing his temples. "What isn't negotiable is basic professionalism, Arden. You think you can manage that for 5 minutes?" Arden smirked. "I'll give it my best shot, Captain. No promises, though." Sereth, standing just behind Elias, tilted her head as if cataloging the crew's dynamics. "You run a tight ship," she remarked dryly. "Don't encourage him," Elias muttered. The tension in the air was undeniable, though Sereth's calm demeanor seemed to diffuse it. Or maybe it just made everyone too uncomfortable to address the elephant in the room. Either way, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this so-called gift was a ticking time bomb. Over the next few days, Sereth's presence aboard the stalwart Endeavor became both a curiosity and a challenge. She shadowed the crew, observing their routines with an unsettling precision. She had a habit of appearing exactly where she wasn't expected: engine room, mess hall, even the cramped wreck area where Arden was halfway through a particularly dramatic retelling of their last mission. "And then boom, plasma cannon right through the pirate leader's ship," Arden exclaimed, gesturing wildly. Elias swoops in cool as ice and— "Missed the first shot," Sereth interjected from the corner, causing Arden to nearly drop his cup. "Whoa, where did you come from?" he demanded, clutching his chest. "Engineering," she replied, unbothered. "But please continue. I'm fascinated by your ability to rewrite history." The crew's laughter echoed through the room, breaking some of the lingering tension. Elias, leaning against the doorway, watched the exchange with a mix of amusement and wariness. Sereth was sharp. Too sharp. She wasn't just observing them. She was studying them. But to what end? It wasn't until a week later, during a routine supply run, that Elias began to suspect how much more there was to Sereth than met the eye. While the crew loaded crates of ore from a small mining station, she wandered into the cockpit, her gaze tracing the complex web of controls and displays. "Impressive," she murmured, her fingers hovering over the navigation console. "Human ships have come a long way." "Careful," Elias said, stepping in behind her. "Touch the wrong button, and you'll eject us into hyperspace." She turned, one eyebrow raised. "Would that be a bad thing?" "Depends on how attached you are to not being atomized," he shot back. For the first time, her expression softened into something almost resembling a smile. "Almost." "Noted, Captain." But as she turned back to the console, her fingers brushed the edge of the screen, and for a split second, something flickered. Data scrolling too quickly for Elias to register. He frowned. "Hey, what was that?" he asked. "What was what?" she replied innocently, already stepping away. Elias stared after her, suspicion gnawing at the back of his mind. Sareth wasn't just a gift, and she definitely wasn't just a servant. The question wasn't whether she was hiding something, it was how much, and what it would cost him to find out. Elias Varick wasn't sure what unnerved him more. The way Sareth managed to blend into the crew's routines as though she'd been part of the ship for years, or the subtle ways she seemed to manipulate those routines without anyone noticing. She was like a whisper in the engine room, a shadow in the mess hall, and somehow always exactly where she shouldn't be. Case in point, the cockpit incident. Elias hadn't forgotten that flicker of data, the strange energy in the air when she'd touched the console. It gnawed at him like a loose rivet in his mind, but when he'd mentioned it to Arden, the first mate had waved him off. "Maybe she was just curious," Arden had said, grinning. "I mean, she's probably never seen tech as unique as ours." "Unique is one way to describe a control panel held together with duct tape and prayer," Elias shot back, though his unease remained. Sareth, for her part, maintained her inscrutable demeanor. If she noticed Elias watching her more closely, she didn't let on. Her calm was almost eerie at times, though it occasionally cracked in moments of unexpected humor. Like the time the ship's cook, a burly Martian named Kroll, tried to introduce her to his signature dish, Grivnak stew. "It's a delicacy," Kroll said, plopping a steaming bowl in front of her with pride. The greenish sludge bubbled ominously, emitting a smell that could peel paint. Sareth tilted her head, studying the bowl as though it might sprout legs and attack her. "Interesting. Does it always vibrate like that?" "That means it's fresh," Kroll said with a grin. "I see," Sareth replied, her expression impassive. "And have you considered weaponizing it?" The crew burst into laughter, Kroll included, though he made a point of finishing the stew himself. The turning point came 2 weeks into their journey when the stalwart Endeavour intercepted a distress signal. It was faint and crackling, barely cutting through the ship's comms, but unmistakably a call for help. "Priority 1, all hands to stations," Elias ordered, his tone sharp. "Arden, pinpoint the source." "Got it," Arden replied, fingers flying over the console. "Looks like it's coming from an asteroid station near the Karthos belt. Unregistered, but oh, great. It's lit up like a jackpot on every pirate frequency in the sector." Elias grimaced. The Karthos belt was notorious for being a no-man's land of smuggling operations and mercenary turf wars. A distress signal out there was about as inviting as a bear trap. "We're answering it," Elias said firmly, already anticipating the pushback. "Captain," Sareth said from her seat at the edge of the bridge, her voice calm but urgent, "this could be a trap." "It probably is," Elias admitted, "but I'm not in the habit of ignoring distress calls." "An admirable trait," Sareth replied. "Also a potentially fatal one." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You volunteering to write my epitaph?" "I already have a draft," she deadpanned, earning a smirk from Arden and a groan from the comms officer. The station was a mess when they arrived. Half the docking bays were scorched from what looked like plasma fire, and the signal grew fainter with every passing minute. As the crew geared up to investigate, Sareth stood at the edge of the armory, her arms crossed. "Not coming with us?" Elias asked, strapping on his sidearm. "I don't typically run toward danger," she said, "but if you insist, I can provide moral support from a safe distance." Elias chuckled despite himself. Suit yourself. Just don't touch anything important while we're gone. Inside the station, the air was thick with tension and the faint smell of ozone. The crew fanned out, their weapons ready, scanning every shadow for signs of trouble. It wasn't long before they found the source of the distress signal, a small group of refugees huddled in a cargo bay, their faces pale with fear. "We've got survivors," Elias reported into his comms. "Looks like—" A deafening clang cut him off, followed by the unmistakable hum of a plasma rifle charging. Pirates, of course. The firefight that followed was chaotic and brutal, plasma bolts lighting up the dim corridors. Elias and his crew fought like hell, but it was Sareth's unexpected intervention that turned the tide. Back on the ship, she'd overridden the station's security systems, redirecting power to force shields and locking down pirate reinforcements. "Nice work," Elias said breathlessly as they regrouped on the ship, the refugees safely aboard. "Didn't know you had a knack for hacking." Sareth met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "There's a great deal you don't know about me, Captain." "That's becoming painfully obvious," Elias muttered. Later, in the quiet of his quarters, Elias reviewed the day's events with a glass of contraband whiskey in hand. Sareth's abilities were no accident, he realized. She wasn't just observant or clever. She was something else entirely. Something dangerous. As if summoned by his thoughts, a soft knock sounded at his door. Sareth stepped in, her amber eyes catching the low light. "You're not what you seem," Elias said, skipping the pleasantries. "Neither are you," she replied evenly. Then after a beat, "Though I'd wager your secrets are far less interesting than mine." Elias raised his glass. "I guess we'll see, won't we?" Her lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Indeed, Captain, we will." The stalwart Endeavour drifted quietly in orbit around the planet Arcos 7, a lush world shrouded in swirling blue-green clouds. The planet was a hub for interstellar trade, its bustling orbital platforms and planetary markets teeming with species from every corner of the galaxy. But Elias Varick wasn't here for trade, and he certainly wasn't here for pleasure. He leaned against the bridge console, watching the planet rotate beneath them. Sareth stood beside him, her usual composure in place, though Elias had noticed the faintest hint of unease in her posture. "You've been quiet," he said, breaking the silence. "I wasn't aware you required running commentary," she replied without missing a beat. Elias smirked. "I don't. But you've got that look." "What look?" "The one that says you're either planning something or regretting something. Not sure which is worse." Sareth didn't respond immediately, her amber eyes fixed on the viewport. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. "Arcos 7 is significant to my people. It's one of the few places where Zalari and humans coexist without tension." Elias raised an eyebrow. "That sounds almost peaceful. Doesn't seem like your style." Her lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile. "Perhaps I have layers, Captain." Before Elias could respond, Arden's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, we've got a visitor. Small shuttle on approach. Looks official, like really official." Elias straightened. "Great. More bureaucracy." The shuttle docked smoothly, and moments later, Elias and Sareth were greeting a Zalari envoy in the ship's hangar. The envoy was tall even by Zalari standards, her silver robes glinting in the artificial light. Her sharp features were marred by a permanent scowl, and her voice carried the tone of someone who had long ago lost their patience for pleasantries. "Captain Varick," she said, inclining her head briefly. "And Sareth." Elias caught the way her gaze lingered on Sareth, the faint tension in her posture. He filed the observation away for later. "What can we do for you, envoy?" Elias asked, keeping his tone neutral. "I bring a message from the Zalari High Council," the envoy said. "A matter of utmost importance." "Of course it is," Elias muttered under his breath. The envoy's sharp glare suggested she'd heard him. She handed over a sealed data crystal, her long fingers curling slightly, as if reluctant to let it go. "The contents are for your eyes only, Captain. But I will say this. Your recent acquisition is a matter of concern. Elias glanced at Sareth, who remained impassive. Noted, he said. The envoy's gaze lingered on Sareth for a moment longer, before she turned and left without another word. Back in his quarters, Elias inserted the data crystal into his console. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a series of encrypted files. As he decrypted the first one, a voice recording played, distorted but clear enough to recognize as a Zalari council member. Captain Varric, the individual you have been gifted is not merely a servant. She is an operative, a key figure in a classified initiative. Her presence on your vessel is both a privilege and a danger. Use caution. Elias leaned back in his chair, the weight of the words sinking in. He glanced at the door, half expecting Sareth to appear as if summoned. Instead, Arden barged in, holding a tray of what appeared to be snacks. Figured you could use a break, he said, plopping the tray onto the desk. What's the big secret? Elias closed the hologram with a sigh. Nothing you need to worry about. Arden raised an eyebrow. Uh-huh. You know you're terrible at lying. Better than you are at knocking, Elias shot back. Arden grinned. Fair enough. Anyway, you might want to check on Sareth. She's been in the engine room for an hour, and I'm pretty sure she's up to something. Elias found Sareth exactly where Arden had said, in the engine room, her hands hovering over the control panel. Lines of alien code scrolled across the screen, too fast for Elias to decipher. Should I be concerned? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Sareth didn't flinch. Not unless you're opposed to increased efficiency. Your ship's power grid is archaic. Archaic, huh? That's polite. Elias stepped closer, watching as she manipulated the console with precision. Care to explain why the High Council thinks you're a danger? Her hands stilled, and she turned to face him, her expression unreadable. I didn't realize you were taking their opinion so seriously. I take anything seriously when it involves my crew, and my ship. Sareth studied him for a long moment before answering. They're afraid of what I know, what I can do, and perhaps what I've already done. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and full of implications Elias didn't yet understand. You're going to have to be more specific, he said finally. I can't, she replied simply. Not yet. Elias ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. You're not making this easy, you know. Nothing worth understanding ever is, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Then, with a faint smile, but if it helps, you're handling this far better than most humans would. Elias chuckled despite himself. High praise, I'll take it. For now, he decided to let the matter rest. But the questions lingered, growing louder with every passing moment. What secrets did Sareth hold, and why had she been placed in his care? More importantly, what would happen when those secrets finally came to light? The stalwart Endeavor hurtled through the cold void, its engines burning brighter than ever. On the bridge, Elias Varric stood at the helm, his hands firm on the controls. The ship's systems hummed with an energy that seemed almost alive. Sareth's enhancements had pushed the aging vessel into new territory, and not a single crew member dared question the miracle. They were too busy preparing for the showdown ahead. Their destination, an uncharted sector near the edge of Zalari space, where a rogue faction of the High Council had gathered to finalize a plan that would throw the fragile alliance into chaos. Sareth's knowledge, once cryptic and fragmented, had become clear in the hours after Elias confronted her in the engine room. Now, as the pieces fell into place, the stakes were undeniable. You're sure about this? Elias asked Sareth, who stood beside him, her calm demeanor an anchor amidst the storm of tension. As sure as one can be when confronting treachery, corruption, and likely certain death, she replied. Then after a beat, but if it helps, I find your optimism refreshingly naive. Elias snorted. Glad I could inspire. The rogue faction station came into view, a monstrous construct of jagged metal and pulsating lights. It looked more like a creature than a structure, its spindly arms reaching into the void like claws. As they approached, the ship's comm system crackled to life. "Unidentified vessel, state your purpose." Elias leaned forward, his grin razor-sharp. "Captain Elias Varick, here to deliver a strongly worded complaint. Mind opening the door?" The line went dead for a moment, and then a voice, low and tense, replied, "You're either brave or stupid, Captain." "Bit of both," Elias said, cutting the connection before they could argue. "Subtle," Sareth commented, her amber eyes glinting with amusement. "Subtlety's overrated," Elias replied, flipping switches. "Let's see if they like fireworks." The assault on the station was a blur of fire and fury. Plasma bolts lit up the dark corridors as Elias and his crew pushed through, guided by Sareth's uncanny ability to predict their enemies' movements. She wasn't just leading them, she was outpacing them, her actions precise and deliberate. It was as though she'd been here before. "Care to share how you know every inch of this place?" Elias asked as they ducked into cover, the hum of approaching drones growing louder. "I've read the blueprints," she said simply, "and burned them." "Of course you did." The confrontation came in the station's central chamber, a cavernous space filled with glowing consoles and towering figures, Zalari counselors who had betrayed their own. Sareth stepped forward, her posture regal and unyielding, as though she belonged there. "Sareth," one of them said, their voice dripping with disdain, "you've returned." "Did you think I wouldn't?" she replied, her tone sharp enough to cut steel. "You made me what I am. You thought you could control me." "And yet here you are," another counselor sneered, "a pawn of a human captain, no less." Elias stepped forward, his pistol raised. "Pawn's a strong word. I'd go with reluctantly tolerated co-worker." The counselor opened their mouth to retort, but Sareth cut them off. "Enough. Your schemes end here. The Alliance will stand, and your ambitions will die in the dark where they belong." The ensuing fight was chaos. Elias and his crew provided cover, while Sareth moved like a storm, her hands glowing with an energy Elias had never seen before. She wasn't just Zalari. She was something more, a fusion of biology and technology that defied understanding. In the end, the rogue counselors fell, their plans reduced to ash. But it wasn't without cost. The station began to collapse, its power core destabilized by the fight. "We need to move," Elias shouted, pulling Sareth toward the exit. "Now!" Back on the stalwart Endeavor, the crew watched as the station erupted in a brilliant burst of light. For a moment no one spoke. Then Arden broke the silence. "Well," he said, "I guess subtlety really is overrated." The bridge erupted in laughter, the tension finally breaking. In the quiet aftermath, Elias found Sareth in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. He joined her, the weight of their journey settling over him. "You didn't have to stay," he said. "You could have left when it was over." Sareth turned to him, her expression softer than he'd ever seen. "And go where?" "I've spent my life being what others wanted me to be. For the first time, I have a choice. And perhaps I've grown fond of your naive optimism." Elias chuckled. "Careful, Sareth. People might think you actually like us. Don't push your luck, Captain." They sat in companionable silence, the vastness of space stretching out before them. Whatever came next, Elias knew one thing for certain. He wasn't the same man who had accepted Sareth as a reward. And she wasn't the same woman who had stood silently in his quarters that first day. Together, they had carved out something new, something neither of them could have imagined. And in the ever-shifting galaxy, that was a victory worth holding on to.